Mars in Libra is one of the more notorious zodiac placements for Mars, along with Mars in Taurus and Mars in Cancer. It's not generally thought of as a real party time or a real jackpot when we interpret Mars in Libra or any of those signs. Yet, of course, you find there's pretty fabulous people with Mars in those signs because there's a lot more to a chart than just Mars in Libra or any sign. In fact, there's a lot more to Mars in Libra than just Mars in Libra. So when we talk about Mars in Libra, let's also take a look at some actual people with Mars in Libra and see what's actually going on in their charts. Now, the biggest issue causing this kind of notorious nature of Mars in Libra is that there's a lot of disharmony between what the planet symbolizes and what the sign symbolizes. And the most basic disharmony there is Mars is the planet of inception, where Venus is the sign for balance. And you'll see this even in the glyphs, which represent the planets. This bit of the symbolism is worked into the nature of the glyphs. Mars has this arrow pointing up, which sets things off balance and gets them rolling. Whereas Libra, it looks like scales because it's balanced and equal. Looks like an equal sign. So Mars puts things off balance to get them rolling, to get them started. It's inceptive. Whereas Libra seeks balance. So what we have here is a disharmony where our attempts to set things in motion get frustrated, and our attempts to be balanced get frustrated as well. So the person with Mars in Libra will be struggling with the dynamic of wanting to balance themselves, but trying to do so with things that are inherently not balancing, with things that are inherently passionate and stimulating. All of the classic texts paint a certain picture of how to interpret Mars in Libra, which I will kind of represent here in the next things I'm going to say. You expect this native to be very influenced by passion and desire. Okay? Because their passions are imbalanced. And so you're going to also expect the person to be overly dependent on the sources of things that will fulfill their passions and desires, including the opposite sex. So they'll be very, very dependent on ratification and acceptance by the other gender. The other issue that will come up is the desires of a person with Mars in Libra are unpredictably strong. It's not a problem to have strong desires when they're predictable and steady. But the problem with Mars in Libra is they're unpredictably strong because they're oscillating with this ideal of trying to be balanced. So there'll be a lot of appetite for money, a lot of appetite for sophisticated things, high class things, a lot of appetite for like good food, good clothes. And one other thing to bring up, when you have unbalance, you know, the planet of setting things in motion in the sign of where things become settled and balanced, the interpretation, another branch of this interpretation is that the person tends to wander. They don't tend to settle. Or they don't tend to relax and focus. They tend to drift around, move around constantly. So they'll do a lot of relocating, a lot of moving here and there. They will try a lot of different things in life. The next big issue with Mars in Libra is that Mars is the planet of self-reliance. But Libra is a sign that facilitates cooperation. So the clash between the planet of self-reliance being in the sign of cooperation, you're going to get in two branches of how to interpret this. The first branch is, well, the cooperative efforts are difficult because the person is trying to be self-reliant, but at the same time trying to engage in relationships. So there's going to be difficulty in relationships, and it's going to affect all types of relationships according to classics and according to practice. It's going to affect marriage. It's going to affect the extended family, and it's even going to affect relationships with friends. So the issue of wanting to be in relationships but actually not wanting to be in relationships, wanting to be independent, or expecting the relationship to serve you, or overcompensating for that oscillation makes the relationships difficult to maintain. And then another branch of interpretation on the self-reliance versus cooperation clash is that you're also getting the self-image contrasting with the group. The cooperation unit is the group, the self-reliance unit is the individual. So you're getting like a clash between the individual and the group. And one of the other ways that this works out is that it creates some jealousy. That generates what classics describe as like a thievish mentality or selfish mentality, and also an unsympathetic mentality. Because the self is contrasting with the group, so you're not really very sensitive to what the group is wanting and needing, and you're very sensitive to what you want and need. You are trying to get things from the relationships that you're in, and then you're wondering, why are these relationships not working? Because the other person feels like you're just trying to take stuff from them. Take their time, take their energy, take their attention. The third aspect that's super important for Mars in Libra is that Mars is the planet of war, and Libra is the sign of peace. This is where the passive-aggressive tendency comes from, Mars in Libra. Because the planet of war is trying to operate in an environment of peace. So the person is quite argumentative because it's the war planet invading this peaceful zone, but they're trying to do their warlike things in a Librarian way, like in a peaceful way or in an intellectual way or in a refined way. Or basically, you just boil it down to this. The person is argumentative but too timid. So it's like the Myers-Briggs INFJ mentality, where they're negative, but they're introverted. So they want to criticize something, but they can't express it. So you get this passive-aggressive thing. Then there's yet another issue. Mars is the planet of strong people. Athletes, warriors, men with muscles. Libra is not the sign for strong people. Libra is the sign for sensitive people. It's an air sign that belongs to Venus. So, you have a clash between strength and sensitivity, or muscle versus heart. And what you get as a result of this is the Mars in Libra native tends to be callous or unempathetic. They don't even put themselves in the other person's place. It's very foreign to them to try to feel what the person that they're talking to is feeling. They feel what they feel. They're very sensitive to themselves. So they have strong sensitivity to the self. They're very sensitive on how they're feeling and what they're thinking. But they're very unsensitive to others. Now, there is actually one positive synergy between Mars and Libra. And it's the fact that Mars is the planet of freedom. And Libra is the sign for liberty. You'll find that people with Mars and Libra, they hold personal liberty as an important moral ideal. Something that we should never give up. Something that we should never even infringe upon in others. So although they're insensitive to others, the Mars and Libra person does try to give the other person their space, and they expect that to be the solution to the problem. In their relationships, they have a lot of problems because they have Mars and Libra. So they think, let me be nice and try to give this person their space because everybody should have personal freedom. But actually, the solution is not to give more space. It's to give more attention and care, loving attention. Now, one other thing I want to talk about with Mars and Libra that's slightly redeeming besides the one synergy of freedom and liberty. The other thing is, if Mars is in Libra, that means it's opposite to Aries. So likely when Mars is in Libra, it may have a big effect on Aries by the oppositional aspect, the 7th house aspect, especially the more it lines up with the cusp. So although Mars in Libra is negative, it does create a nice effect for Aries and whatever house Aries might happen to be. And that's something we want to bear in mind. But let us see now some actual people who are well known. Candy Bar, Jenna Hayes, Pamela Anderson. These are sort of like sex symbols, right? Mars in Libra would be definitely contributing to that significantly because of the first aspect of Mars in Libra, which is strong passions or unbalanced passions. Then we have a lot of entertainers. Nicole Kidman, Priyanka Chopra, Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, Eminem, Freddie Mercury, Elvis Presley, Kylie Jenner, John Lennon, even Whitney Houston, Sinead O'Connor. So one thing that I want to mention about entertainers, of course, Bill Gates and Bill Clinton is not exactly an entertainer. But in the category of entertainers, one interesting thing about entertainment is you have to be entertaining. If you're boring and normal and usual, that's not very entertaining. So Mars in Libra is not so bad for entertainers because it makes the passions unbalanced, and that's interesting to watch. You don't sit around and watch balanced people. They don't do anything interesting. It's interesting to see the life of a person who's imbalanced. Hence, people with Mars in Libra can actually get a spotlight. Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, they both have a lot of, let's say Bill Gates, for example, he has a lot of appetite for fine things. He wanted a lot of money. He really wanted to become rich. Also, he has scandalous problems with adultery. Bill Clinton, same thing, scandals with adultery and also a huge appetite for power. He becomes the president of the United States. We'll look at some of these people in more detail in a sec, but let's just go through the basic rest of the list. Nikola Tesla, Sigmund Freud, Abraham Lincoln, Nelson Mandela, Margaret Thatcher, and Kim Jong-un. So it's mostly the appetite for power, which is from Mars and Libra, which is the contributing factor for politicians. Now, let's look at some of these actual positions of Mars and Libra. First of all, for Pamela Anderson, it's in Chitra Nakshatra. And it's in the 5th house, and the interesting thing is it's opposite Saturn. So now why is that interesting that it's opposite to Saturn? Because Saturn is exalted in Libra. So this is a condition for what in India is called Nichbang Yoga, where debilitations or troubles are mitigated by other circumstances that the planet is under. So Mars in Libra is suffering because it doesn't get along with the environment of Libra. But Saturn gets along great with the environment of Libra, and Saturn is aspecting Mars in Libra. So the interpretation there is that the Mars in Libra learns from the influence of Saturn how to deal with Libra. So here in Pamela Anderson's case, we find that this particular Mars in Libra isn't going to look as bad as it does on the screen right now, because it's getting positive influence from Saturn, which is exalted in Libra. Priyanka Chopra, same exact thing almost. Same ascendant, so Saturn in Libra is still in the 5th house like Pamela Anderson. Also Chitra Nakshatra like Pamela Anderson. And it is not opposite to Saturn, but it's with Saturn. Bill Gates does not have Mars in Chitra like Pamela Anderson and Priyanka Chopra. He's got it in a Hasta. Hasta is more about making money, exchange, and building things, and dealing with fine details. So he's got Mars in the Hasta, and he doesn't have it in the 5th house. He has it in the 4th house, and he has it in Raja Yoga with the 5th Lord. So there's a house exchange between the 4th and the 5th Lord. Like, in other words, it puts good circumstances on this Mars in Libra, so you would modify the basic interpretation to be less negative. Now, if we think about that effect that Mars in Libra has on Aries, because of being opposite to Aries, in Pamela Anderson's case, it's in the 5th house, so it's going to have that positive effect on the 11th, the house of entertainment. Priyanka Chopra's case, the same. Bill Gates' case, it's going to have that effect on career or social status, the 10th house. I also thought we could look at Kylie Jenner. Her Mars in Libra is in Chitra like Pamela Anderson and Priyanka Chopra. It is in the 10th house, opposite Saturn. So again, just like Pamela Anderson and Priyanka Chopra, it's getting a lot of influence from Saturn, which is the planet that is exalted in Libra. So it's not really causing its trouble It is certainly still giving its flavor of a passionate person, unbalanced desires, interesting to look at, probably not the most easy person to relate with, etc. But not in a really bad way, in a way that adds to the person's success, because Mars in Libra there is getting influenced by Saturn, which knows how to use Libra. Whitney Houston is another good example of Mars in Libra. She has it in Hasta, not Chitra like the other ladies. And it's in the 8th house. So it's more sexual. And that is giving it a big opposition to the 2nd house. Her 2nd house is fantastic because it has a Jupiter-Moon conjunction and getting aspected by its Lord. And that's the house for the voice. So that illustrates what I'm talking about, bearing in mind that although Mars in Libra isn't the biggest jackpot in the world, when Mars is in Libra, it's going to influence Aries. So whatever house Aries happens to be is going to hit a bit of a jackpot. Let's look at 2 more. Sinead O'Connor, such an interesting person. Doesn't really quite fit in with the rest of the list. Kind of fits with John Lennon. Sinead O'Connor doesn't have the same nakshatra as any of the people we looked at so far. It's neither Chitra nor Hasta. It's Uttar Palguni, which has just a little bit of space at the beginning of Libra currently. Hers is in the 11th house, opposite to Saturn. You see there's a really clear pattern. Pamela Anderson in the 5th house, opposite Saturn. Priyanka Chopra in the 5th house with Saturn. Kylie Jenner, 10th house, opposite Saturn. Sinead O'Connor, 11th house, opposite Saturn. So a lot of times Mars in Libra will really benefit or be able to evolve well when Saturn is aspecting it. And then finally, Sigmund Freud, the psychologist. Sigmund Freud's Mars is on the border of Hasta. Border of a nakshatra is kind of complex. And his is in the 12th house. And it's opposite to Jupiter in Pisces. So it's right at the border of early Libra. And so it's getting a strong opposition from Jupiter, which is in Pisces, at the end of Pisces. The owner of Libra is in Raj Yoga with it. This is another case which is technically known as Nichbang, where it modifies or alleviates difficult conditions. Now, what we do in these videos with the planets and the signs is I show you a consistent technique that you can use for any planet and any sign. And the technique is very simple. You look for where the planet symbolizes something that's very, very similar to what the sign symbolizes. And once you find that, you assess whether or not the planet and the sign are harmonious about that thing or whether they're antithetical about that thing. The dissonant resonance reveals what's complex or difficult for the native. The harmonious resonance, on the other hand, indicates what's easy, what comes natural, what's an inherent strength for the native. What I'm teaching you really is the method of how to do astrological interpretation by going down into the engine of the symbolism and comparing the parts. The actual interpretation that you should give is going to be individualized per the individual chart. So if you have person A with the moon in Scorpio and person B with the moon in Scorpio, it's not going to be exactly the same interpretation. Because person B's moon might have an aspect from something and person A's moon doesn't, etc., 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 etc. But what I'm showing you in the videos is the backbone of what a planet and a sign symbolizes. And once you understand that backbone, you modify it based on the circumstances, the extraneous circumstances that are affecting it in an individual chart. So I hope you really like this system, not just this one video, but all the videos that we do on the planets and the signs. We'll do them all. And I hope you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of those. And I hope to see you around soon. Thank you.